All right, it looks like a sidebar is occurring in that courtroom in Pike County, and what you just saw, or who you just saw on the stand, was Luke Roden. His dad, Kenneth Roden, was shot in the eye, slaughtered by the prosecution, says one of the members of the Wagner family, of which George Wagner IV is also on trial for. Here today in this courtroom, we have to give him credit and support him because he did not opt out of being recorded. He wanted everyone to share his grief and his pain and talk about his dad. So let me bring my guests in to talk about this. Paul Townsend, trial attorney, Matt Mangino, trial attorney, long-time legal analyst. Paul, let me start with you first. What was the effect of his testimony on the jury?
So I think this is an interesting point. So one, we're going to see Luke Roden, and he's clearly emotional. This is obviously going to be very difficult for him to talk about. It's his family members getting killed. But one thing that I think might be evident to people who practice in this field that some of our watchers might not really pick up on is how the prosecutor went through the different cameras. So when you're directing a witness, sometimes you have to ask questions that seemingly don't necessarily make sense to somebody who's watching who's not actually in this industry, because you have to anticipate certain arguments that a defense attorney might make and try and head them off before they're actually made. So by having Luke Roden go through the positioning of those cameras and whether or not they were functional, it very well could have been the prosecution trying to cut off an argument that, well, there's cameras there and they would have picked up maybe somebody else doing this, and we won't know because they were clearly operating, and the prosecution has now gotten Luke Roden to kind of say that either they weren't working or they picked up X, Y, and Z. So that's just one thing that I think is kind of interesting, that doesn't necessarily come through, and a lot of people might have been wondering what was the point of going through the different cameras and where they were and why they were working. But I overall thought that it was a very kind of compelling short snippet of testimony that we just caught, from somebody who is very clearly, very emotionally invested in the testimony he's giving.